Hello world, Pixfox here. Now typically I start off with something big, however, I'm going to be starting off low-key. Yeah, I consider this very low-key. Would you rather me talk about everything that is wrong with freaking Undertale? No? Good, then we're off to a good start. Anyway, I'm starting off low-key mainly because I'm still making sprites for my character. Don't worry though, the Undertale video will be made whether you like it or not. But anyway, I'm going to be doing a series that I honestly would never thought of doing until just very recently with all the talk about Mario Luigi Superstar Saga plus Bowser Minions. Now, there has been a lot of talk and arguing about which one is the better version, despite the fact that the game hasn't even came out yet. And I find that absolutely ridiculous. Why would you judge a game from 10 minutes of video footage and a trailer? I mean, yeah, I kind of see their arguments, but is it really worth arguing about something that you haven't even seen yet? That's honestly very, very irritating. So basically what I'm going to be doing is basically comparing the two. Now, keep in mind that I don't actually have any nostalgic experiences when it comes to either of these games. While I have actually watched the original game being played through a speedrun, and I have seen bits and pieces of the original game through Chuck Conroy, and also I have played about like 10 minutes of the original game, mainly because it was my brother's copy and he pretty much took over the game after that time, and I really just was using it as an excuse to kind of unload action replay codes and kind of test my ability to see if I can create something new. So there's that too. So I quite literally have absolutely no nostalgic experience of either game. So I'm going to be looking through this game in the eyes of someone who has never played the game and have only seen like a few bits and pieces of each game. Now, with that being said, people are probably going to be arguing, are you basically copying off of ExoParadigmGamer? And the answer is no, but there is a lot of inspiration that came from them. Instead of comparing two games and seeing which one defines a remake, I'm comparing two games to see which one that you want to buy over the other. And this one will be based off of points, and some of it will actually have some of my personal opinions, but overall though, I feel like that this video does need to be made because of how much people are so adamant about the original game. It's honestly pathetic and sad. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with a segment about graphics.
Whoa, nice graphics! I'd like to get my hands on that game.
Bruh.
Now, truth be told, I can care less about what a game looks like. It can just simply look like this, and I still play it. It can even be a text-based adventure for like here, and I still would play it. Because to me, graphics do not make a game. They honestly are just there to make it look good. You can argue that it's also there so that way you can kind of identify some of the characters or whatever, but you know, if everyone was described through text, I still play it, and yeah, pretty much. So really, when it comes to arguing about graphics, none of that matters. It doesn't matter. I really hate it when people always argue that, oh yeah, this game has some amazing graphics, look how vague the graphics are. Those are pretty graphics, but how's the gameplay? It sucks, but look how great the graphics are. I hate that simple mind point of view, and honestly, you can thank the PC Master Race gods or whatever for that issue. And you know, it really shouldn't be an issue, and that's something Nintendo does know quite a lot about. You know, a game is not known for its graphics, but for its gameplay. And that's why I love Nintendo so much. So arguing about graphics this isn't even a contest here. I just wanted to talk about my point of view on them. But anyway, now let's actually talk about the actual issue, personality. So typically when it comes to personality, the original typically wins. This is because back in the day, there was a lot of issues about blast processing and seeing which system can shove the most things in your face. And so to do that, what they do is that they add a lot of personality into the game. This nowadays isn't really an issue because we all know how much we can put into a game and have so many details into one thing, so we don't need any kind of extreme blast processing. Look at this crazy nonsense going on, because we're already at the point where there's enough detail to tell what's going on in a game without having to, doing anything over the top. Now people are gonna say that kind of ruins the game a little bit, but I really don't see it. I mean, yeah, true, I will admit the cartoony, buggy-eyed toads are actually pretty funny, but is it really a game breaker? Oh, but the Koopa doesn't have its Air Force helmet on. Yeah, and do you know the important significance of the people that you just listed are to the story? You only see them once, right? I mean, yeah, true, that adds in a little bit of personality, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it should break the game. Like for instance, Sharon the Wanderer 2. I've actually played this game for both the Game Boy Color and the DS. When I saw the Game Boy Color version, I was absolutely amazed by how much color they can put into one image. More accurately, cutscenes. And because they even animate, for goodness sake, and I was just mind-boggled, and how did they do this? I seriously hacked into the game, I couldn't figure it out, and it was just absolutely amazing in how they did it. But I still played and preferred the DS version, mainly because jars were more abundant, and everyone knows how important jars are when it comes to Sharon the Wanderer. But either way though, while yes, the game did have a lot less personality and wow factor, the fact is that it was a much more stable game, and also navigating through dungeons wasn't an absolute nightmare, like in the GBC version. In the original, Kappa would actually run with a sign that says now loading, but in the remake, that's simply not there. But you know what? It's okay, because I know I can still get the same, if not better experience through the remake. This also helped out because of the two screens of the DS, where a scene could be happening from the top screen, while on the bottom screen could have the characters interacting with each other, asking what the heck is going on. With the Game Boy Color version, you're forced to see the cutscene and then either have dialogue box on top of it, or have it flip back to the characters and then they're talking and turning and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And overall, I just had a better experience when it came to the DS remake. And I feel like that they're going to be doing that the same way when it comes to the 3DS version of Superstar Saga than it would be with the Game Boy Advance version, thanks to those two screens. So anyway, back to the idea of personality. I'm going to 100% admit that the original would have more personality. Is that a deal breaker? No, because the enhanced version is enhanced for a reason, and still a great experience, if not better, if I were to play the 3DS version than if I were to play the original Game Boy Advance version. Not because of the graphics, like I said, I really don't care about it. In fact, you know what, pixel art is actually something that I do for a living. Okay, maybe not for a living, but it's still a hobby of mine. And also because pixel art is actually being seen as an art form and not necessarily as a limitation. People nowadays, even with the Master Race PC bullcrap, they still make pixel games because it looks nice. No, they only make it because of nostalgia. That could be another reason, but it's mostly because it looks nice. I create pixels because they are awesome. I enjoy making pixels. They're fun. And they're easy. Anyway, despite all the changes with the cartoony graphics and whatever, the text is mostly the same. I wish I could say the exact same, but because of the new enhancements, they had to modify some of the text, which isn't really a big deal breaker because every other text string is actually 100% the same, as far as I've seen. So I don't really think that changes in 2 different sprites or whatever is really going to break a game. And people are going to argue, well, because they're just 2 different sprites, that means that the rest of the game is going to look like this. How do you know that? The game isn't even released until October. Okay? In fact, how do you know that those review copies of the game were actually the full game? Because you know, for all we know, they just could have gotten that portion of the game where basically Bowser takes them away from their ship and then the game ends. It's a review copy. What can I say? They show limitations so that way they can wow the fans later. Think about it that way. So now let's go ahead and talk about Immersion. Now typically Immersion should not really affect either game. However, I've actually ruined video games for myself. It is honestly no one at fault except me. When I got into game hacking, I pretty much see games like this now. So because of that, I really can't get myself immersed into a GBA. However, I can understand how Immersion may differ from everybody else. But, so for me though, it is important for me to actually smile while playing a game again. I haven't smiled playing a game in a very long time. I now just see game as goals, objectives, flags, hexadecimal, coloration, etc. Instead of being invested and immersed into this world that I have never seen before. This beauty and wonder and splendor that has me captivated by this world that just would keep me away from my life's problems. Admittedly, I am actually pretty tired of editing software because it did ruin video games for me, and I don't want to ruin any more of the splendor that I have left. So because of this, I actually sort of am retired, but I still do it occasionally. And I'd rather have a game where I don't know how, this was made, this was the limitations that they had. I've seen that sprite before, they reused it. They reused it because they didn't have the proper sprites for it, etc, etc. I want to be invested and immersed into this fantasy that you have created. Make that happen for me, please. I haven't smiled in so long. So because I cannot hack into the 3DS for any reason at the moment, but when the technology and software becomes easier to access, I will be getting more involved into the hacking community for the 3DS. But at the moment, I'm going to enjoy it as long as I can before my inner self says, you should mod anything and everything that the 3DS has to offer. So because of that, I'm going to be playing the 3DS while my innocence is still around. Now, of course, like I said, this is strictly because of my own problems. This is not really something that you should judge in regards of your personal experience through playing games. If you feel like that more personality is more valuable for you, and that helps you get more immersed into the game, then so be it. However, because I know that the gameplay, or I guess that's not entirely true, because I do know that the gameplay is actually a lot slower in the new one. But anyway, however, majority of the mechanics are still around in the remake. The text is directly ripped, well, mostly directly ripped from the original, and the game is more enhanced than the original. I can actually see myself having more fun playing through the 3DS remake than I would if I had the original. But like I said, this is more up to you, so this is your point. Now let's talk about accessibility. Now many people are going to say that it's unfair because one came out 14 years ago and the other one's just about to come out. And yeah, I did calculate that into consideration. Now, another thing is though, you can always go to the Wii U shop and buy it on the Wii U, and possibly the Switch if it decides to ever release any virtual console games onto the Switch. But anyway, what's important for me is actually seeing what kind of portable console that I'm able to play this on. So anyway, without further ado, I'm gonna let my real self take care of this, because I'm just a cartoon character and my real self knows a lot more about consoles than I do. With the Game Boy Advance version, I could play with my SP without a front light, my SP with a front light, my DS without a hinge, my DS without a top screen, my DS Lite with lots of ghosting, or my GameCube with the Game Boy player. With the 3DS version, I'm only able to play it on my American non-modded 3DS, unless if it doesn't require any update firmware requirements. I can play it with my modded 3DS, but more than likely I'm going to need some kind of Street Pass feature, checksum or whatever. And I could also be a little frisky and actually get myself... Wait, is frisky the right word? I can also be a little bit daring and get myself the Japanese version with my Japanese new 3DS, but because the game is going to be consistently in 2D, I feel like that this has been a complete waste of my money. So there's really no point in that, and I'm just going to get the American one because it's just going to be easier that way. And besides, for her to get the Japanese version, I might as well just be getting the Game Boy Advance version. Now, of course, with the Game Boy Advance version, I can play it in any kind of region without any changes to the game besides difficulty, because apparently there's a lot of changes with the difficulty throughout the game. And despite how many different ways I can play, this one will actually be the most optimal, mainly because the buttons are very tactile, but the only issue is that I have to play on the bottom screen, and the bottom screen is of course very scratched. I could play on this one, but of course without any hinges that gets annoying. This one's A button is a little bit hard to press, but I guess that works. And this one doesn't have a backlight. Oh wait, other way around. This one doesn't have a backlight. This one has the A button that's hard to press sometimes. So there's that. This would be pretty much the optimal way of playing the GBA version, but I hate the controller, so I'll either have to play it with this or get some kind of mod to play it with this. And I think that would be the best way to play it. Like I said before, this has a bunch of ghosting, so that's kind of useless. However, with the 3DS version, I don't need to worry too much about the accessibility and just play it on my 3DS. And plus, I could just go to the store and buy it, so yeah, there's that convenience too. So yeah. Now keep in mind that these problems would not actually be a problem if Mario Luigi Superstar Saga was just your typical RPG. If it was just as simply as a go at your own pace kind of RPG, and then you go into a random encounter and you select your spell and then watch your opponent burn, then honestly all the faults that I mentioned would not be a problem. However, because there's active events happening at any given point in time, you really need something to be able to see what you're doing at any, well, given point in time. So because of this is why I would choose the 3DS overall. Now some people might argue, why don't I just use emulation? Or get myself a Wii U? Or, you know, well, basically. And the reason for that is because I don't own a Wii U and I'll have to shell out $200 just to play one game. And then with emulation, well, I'm going to be retiring as a pirate, so there's that. And people can argue, well, why don't you just buy the game and then emulate it? And the reason for that is because it's not as fun anymore. When I played Mother 2 on my new 3DS, it wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. Yes, I achieved my long life goal of actually playing an SNES game on the go, but since I was so desensitized to emulation, it just wasn't all that fun. Now let's talk about music. And now people are probably going to argue that this is a seriously unfair advantage because of course the 3DS one is going to sound better. Oh no, trust me when I say that this is actually a very fair comparison. Just because it's on a newer console or because it's a remake doesn't necessarily mean that the music is going to be better. For an example, let's take a look at Dragon Warrior 1. Dragon Warrior 1 has probably one of the worst battle themes I have heard in a long time, officially licensed by Nintendo, of course. I've heard worse through unlicensed games, but but we're not here to talk about those. That just terrifies me. The ear screeching music. But anyway, let's clear my mind off of that. Anyway, Dragon Warrior 1 has the worst officially licensed music, or battle music, that I've ever heard in my entire life. Even worse than Pokemon X and Pokemon Y's battle music, which I say is just darn freaking awful. But despite there being 3 different remakes of the game, Dragon Warrior 1, we gotta say that the Game Boy Color version is actually the best to listen to overall. But I'll let you listen, and just so that way you can see my point here. Yeah. In fact, people might can argue that the NES one is pretty bad, mainly because of how short it is. All that you do here is that one chord, but in the Game Boy Color and the SNES remake, they actually added 3 more chords. So the music is a lot longer and it's a lot more dramatic and epic. But it's still a terrible song to listen to regardless. And, you know, thinking about it, the SNES one would be the best way to listen to this song if it wasn't so freaking terrible. Trumpets were a bad, terrible, abysmal choice. It's just... why did they think that sounded okay? Why did they think that music was okay to begin with? But anyway, when it comes to most RPGs, the battle music is really what defines the game. True, it's not as memorable as, say, like the boss music or any other kind of song that plays only a few times, but you gotta note that the battle music, the original, the normal battle music, the random encounter music, really just the encounter music in general, is actually the thing that is really going to define an entire game. Like, I want to love X and Y, but that battle music is just darn awful. And we're talking about both the trainer battle and the wild battle music. Every other song on that game is amazing. I love it to bits. I have no problem with it. But that battle music is just awful. And now with Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, Mario Luigi Superstar Saga plus Bowser Minions, what Alva Dream decided to do, instead of just revamping the soundtrack, what they did was actually reharmonize it. And this caught me a little bit off guard because I felt like the battle music, despite its short length, it really didn't need to be reharmonized. And when I do hear the reharmonization version, it sounds more like they're aiming their goal towards the people that have played the previous version and wants to see it in this pretty looking light. And to a newcomer, that kind of turns me off. And here's kind of the thing. Sometimes I actually whistle and hum battle music because typically they're very catchy. Even those that don't really sound too well when humming, I still do it anyway because I just absolutely love the battle music. Like Telefang sounds terrible when you hum it. But it is just so catchy and I can't help but to hum. And then with Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, and then they decided to add in an additional chord to the Mario Luigi Superstar Saga plus Bowser Minions, and it honestly kind of ruins the song for me. I think you get the point, right? Right. Anyway, for me, that added chord just kind of ruins the song. It doesn't add in like the suspense or terror that Dragon Warrior did. If anything, it just kind of makes it feel like it's supposed to be a fresh take on a series or something like that, or take advantage of people's nostalgia by adding in that chord while everyone's googling on the new graphics and whatever. That's honestly the appeal that I get from the song, and that disappoints me a bit. But whatever the case is, I guess, yeah, the original wins that one. Honestly, just for the battle theme alone. Oh, come on, what about the other songs? Like I said, actually I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, but they are just scenes. Typically, there are scenes from within the game. They only play like in one little area or whatever. I'm not gonna hate on Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky because of Waterfall Cave, which is a pretty terrible song, admittingly. I hate listening to it. But anyway, the thing is though, the battle theme is what carries on throughout the entire game. And so that's why I am putting so much emphasis on this, because it is just so important to note. Because, this is the song that everyone is going to be hearing throughout their adventure. However, with all of this being said, I fully understand why they did this. And that is because from reading of the comments, apparently they used the original theme, a revamped version of the original theme for Mario Luigi Paper Jam. But that still doesn't change the fact that it was a terrible change. Finally, let's talk about enhancements. Now, enhancements is sort of an unfair comparison, right? It kind of is. As mentioned before, I've actually mentioned this a lot throughout the entire video, that enhancements are actually kind of an important factor when it comes to making a remake. True, it loses a bit of its personality, but it's honestly for the better, in a sense. Like, for an example, Dragon Warrior. When you play the original NES version, the text speed is incredibly slow, and it has to deal with the archaic English, which is actually really cool. But they removed it in the remakes because, first of all, they really had to go a roundabout way when delivering text, and second of all, it just makes the battle speed so much faster. It doesn't say, "Thou hast done well in defeating the slimes," it just says, "You've won, you obtained this many experience and this many gold," instead of, oh yeah, and also dropped item treasure chests. The enemy left behind a chest containing an orb, instead of, "Thou hast done well in defeating the slimes. Thou hast gained 20 experience points. Thou hast received 13 gold. May the heavens smile upon thee. There is a treasure chest. Thou hast opened the treasure chest and revealed an herb." Yeah, that takes forever, as neat as that is. So when it comes to the game's enhancements for this one, now obviously we don't really know too much besides the 10 minutes of gameplay that we received. So obviously the game is very notorious for dumping a bunch of tutorials at you. However, this has been replaced with a guide button, and also a guide button with the suitcase. So in case you ever stop playing for a long period of time and you want to get back into it, but you can't remember how to play the game, instead of having to restart the game from the beginning, you can just look up the guide to refresh your memory. And from what I've seen from the comment section, apparently that they did this for Paper Jam too, and that they allowed you to pretty much practice with this. And I think that is actually a really neat idea, and it really reduces the clutter of tutorials that, well, the original has. Not only that, but as mentioned before, it has 2 screens, so something can be going on the top screen, looming over you, menacingly, while you have characters talking on the bottom screen. So I think that's going to be pretty neat to see. And also, apparently, when comparing the footage, you can now double jump instead of single jump, which I think is actually a pretty neat idea. Overall, the gameplay experience for the remake is definitely going to be much improved despite the slower gameplay speed. So not only that, but there's also new and added dialogue, which many people are probably going to be disappointed not hearing a "do da 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 battle" or even "I want the potato." But if you really need that fix, just watch SMG4's videos. They use those clips a lot. Anyway, so now with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to the results.
This game's winner is...
So as you can clearly see, it just wins by a margin. Honestly, if it wasn't for the enhancements of the new game, the old game and the new game would actually be split. So I completely understand the reason why people are arguing about which version will be better, but as you can kind of see, with all the new additions to the game, they kind of outweighed the bad. And if you're new to the game and never played it once, you're not nostalgia blind, so you can actually see the games for its plus points rather than its down points. Oh my gosh, the Toad's eyes don't bug out, or the sprite work is less creative. Well, if you've never seen those sprites to begin with, can you really complain? And besides, here's another thing that not many people actually mention. is that the newer games kind of follow that routine. So it's just something that you're gonna have to get used to. But if you really can't stand the new direction that Alpha Dream is going for, then play the original, because it's not going to go away anytime soon. Dream Team Brothers and the other one, was there another 3DS title? I can't remember. I don't think there was. But anyway, yeah, Dream Team Brothers actually was very well received. Same thing with Bowser's Inside Story, which I heard actually kind of used the more modern designs of Mario characters. So because of this, you know, like I said, it's not going to go away anytime soon, and just accept it. So anyway, that's all I gotta say, and have a nice day.